welcome Mr. HOEX at the EMRS. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Thanks for having.
The EMRS is a great place to come together all material scientists. Do you have a favorite today? What was your personal highlight?
The personal highlight, it's always very nice to see a Nobel laureate. So we don't see them very often, so that was definitely a highlight. And another highlight in our own symposium was my former colleague Dirk Koenig, talking about computational material science, so developing new materials, which definitely have inspired me to go and make them, go back to the lab and make the materials he predicted.
So it was the reason to come here?
Yeah, definitely, because I'm in solar cell research myself, so we're really mainly focusing on making devices. And devices, of course, if I'm in silicon, so silicon, the silicon wafer is quite thick, but then we use thin films to make the to finish the solar cell. And in the future solar cells, thin films will play an increasingly important role. And that's my main objective, to come here to really, because here's the ideas presented here can be really helpful for us for future, like in 5-10 years, in terms of making the solar cells better. So I'm here to pick the brains of the good, brilliant scientists in Europe.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
Really good. You are also one of the speakers from the symposium. Can you tell us something about your topics?
Yeah, so my topic is it's actually on how to use thin films to make solar cells more efficient. So the best analogy is to look at a solar cell like a balloon. So sunlight impinges on the solar cell, and these photons, so the light particles, they generate electron hole pairs.
Yeah.
So these electron hole pairs, you get more and more, and the balloon fills up. So now we want to make use of this electricity, so these electron hole pairs.
And how do you do this?
Yeah, we have to get them out, but the challenge is we have to get them out separately. So we have to get the electrons and holes out independently.
Okay.
So we have to create like a semi-permeable membrane for electrons and holes. The good thing is that we can basically exploit intrinsic material properties to do this in silicon.
Oh.
So this is, for example, mainly the work function. So if you have high work function materials, you can collect holes. Low work function materials, you can collect electrons. And like typically you just need like 10 to 30 atomic layers of these high or low work function materials to get electrons and holes out. So this is really material research and at the nanoscale. And that was also the topic of my talk.
And it sounds interesting, and sure it is.
Of course it's interesting.
Can you, someone like me who is no researcher, in simple words explain what is the advance of your doing?
Yeah, so basically I have to go back to this balloon again. So this is something we have to do all the time. So we have to get the electrons and holes out in separate locations. And in a solar cell, we do it at the front and the back. So typically we collect the electrons on the front and the holes at the back.
Okay.
And we do that by doping the silicon. So we basically put impurities into the silicon to create this selectivity for electrons and holes. Unfortunately, we have to pay a penalty for that. So we get recombination, which basically means we lose electricity in the balloon. So air goes out of the balloon, so we cannot really be selective enough by using these impurities. By going to completely thin films for this purpose, you basically get rid of these intrinsic losses. So basically it allows you to get the solar cell efficiency to a higher level. In terms of the efficiency ceiling, as we call it, that would increase by 3 or 4% absolute. So instead of 25% fundamental limit, you go to 28, 29%.
Impressive.
So it means that we can push this technology node even further, because currently the current technology node in industry can only do 25%, and so we need something else if we want to continue the growth. It's very comparable to semicon when they go from like 20 nanometers to 14. Okay. So we're basically working on the new technology node. Yeah.
Wow, impressive.
Okay.
So, do you have a vision for the future regarding your scientific field?
Yeah, so my vision is, and that's, I think that will resonate very well with this community, is that thin films will play an increasingly important role in solar cells. So not only the topic I just discussed in terms of carrier extraction, but the next generation will be tandem. So basically we stick 2 solar cells on top of each other, or maybe 3 or 4. And even though I'm convinced that silicon will be the like the bottom cell, so basically that will be the lowest solar cell in the stack, the top solar cells will be fully thin films. So there will be more and more thin films being used in industry. Because I'm mainly I work a lot with industry, so I work a lot with the leading industry players in our field. And so I have a good idea what they are happy to accept in high volume production. And some of the ideas presented here, of course, they will probably never make it in production, or most actually, but definitely the tandem solar cells, I'm convinced they're going to make it, and that's also a significant part of the focus of like 4 or 5 symposia in this field, so it's very topical to have that here.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your time.